Key number 7, service. Key number 7 is about service above self. And when I mean that literally, that whatever you do is it got to be beyond you, that you're contributing to something greater than you. And that's a spiritual conversation in a certain way, because it's about believing that there's something bigger than you out there to start with. It doesn't have to be a God or a church or a mosque or synagogue. It doesn't have to be exactly that. It has to be believing that you're contributing to something bigger than you. A couple examples. One, medical technology organization that builds heart pumps and dialysis machines. Okay, that's what they do. Factory. It's just a factory. Factory workers putting in screws. Okay, putting the screws on the machine. The assembly line, part A, part B, part C goes down the road. Their AGM every year, they have someone who just received a kidney give them a talk. Because why did they get a kidney? Because they had a dialysis machine that they could count on for the 3 years or the 2 years or the 6 months that they were waiting for a kidney. And whose machine was it? The machine that that person put the screw into, or the machine that the person put the wire into. So that connects to service above self, and that's hard sometimes, because sometimes you're sort of a couple of degrees removed from the organization. It's like a chef, Like a chef is one of the happiest people in the world, but they never get the credit for it, because what do we do when we have a good meal? We tell the waiter compliments to the chef. So sometimes you're not 1 degree of separation like the waiter is to you at your table. You're 2 degrees of separation like the chef is. Now the owner of the restaurant is 3 degrees of separation. The boss of that is even further away. So sometimes when you're in organizations like governments, for example, where you're 2 or 3 degrees of separation away, it's hard to find the juice for the joy that you do. It's hard to find the difference that you make, but find it because it's there. It's really, really powerful and really, really important. Viktor Frankl put it very nicely. He wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, which today we call People's Search for Meaning. It was written just after the Second World War from his experience in the concentration camps. And he talked to people in the concentration camps, and some people made it and some people didn't make it. They were all fed the same. So they had the same amount of food for their body, which wasn't very much. But some people made it and some people didn't make it. And he talked to the people that made it. And the people that made it through the concentration camp had the attitude, of gratitude, but they had an attitude that the reason that they made it through the camp was because they had something left to do in their life. They had something left to do. They had something important that they wanted to do. And it could have been weeding the garden. One lady actually wanted to weed her garden because she knew it was in neglect, because she was in jail, she was in the concentration camp for 4 years. She wanted to weed her garden. She wanted to make a beautiful garden. Another person wanted to play with their children and find the children. And whatever it is, they had something beautiful left to do in their lifetime. And when you have something beautiful left to do, you feel engaged with your life. And you feel engaged with your time and your talents, and they line up. They line up to be a joyful experience. I had the great honor of following my unsung hero's footsteps, going to the base camp of Mount Everest. And when I got there, it was a really kind of an interesting conversation to have around what do you think about when you achieve something really incredible, like a big height thing like that. I got to the top of the bottom of Mount Everest, basically. And when I was up at the top of the bottom of Mount Everest, I turned to go down, and I was on my way up the hill, down the hill to go home. And I thought about all the people that loved me, all the people that supported me on my life's journey. And I thought about Mrs. Lampshire, my grade 1 teacher. You see, I have a confession, folks. I failed grade 1. I blew it. Mrs. Lampshire recognized that I wasn't ready to go on, and she helped me back as another year in grade 1. Now, at the time, I think I was a bit annoyed, because all my buddies were moving on, right? But when I look back on that, it was probably one of the single most powerful events in my life. Because if I hadn't been held back in grade 1, I probably would have fumbled through school. As it was, I just barely scraped through school, and I just barely got through college. And I actually went to teach your kids. I barely got through college. I taught for 9 years in the public school system. So my unsung hero is Mrs. Lampshire. And I want to talk about that because Mrs. Lampshire's service to me made a difference to my life. Because I'm not saying this would be a good or bad scenario, but I probably would have ended up failing school and working in the mill in town. And that would have been my life, and I would have probably not known any difference, and I would have more kids and bigger family and whatever. But the truth is, I'm on the stage today because Mrs. Lampshire believed in me. So when I tell the story about my unsung hero, Mrs. Lampshire, I think about all the character traits that she had. I think about her honesty by really being tough with my parents. Look, he's not ready to go. I have to be honest with you, he's not ready for grade 2. He has to stay behind or he's going to get in trouble. I also remember her sense of humor, because she used to laugh at my little jokes. So her honesty, her sense of humor, and finally, I would call it compassion. When I look back on that, she had a lot of compassion for me. So those are the traits of my unsung hero: honesty, a sense of humor and compassion. So in the last 5 minutes that we have, folks, and this is the conversation around service, service greater than you. I want to honor a lineage of folks that have helped you, who may be living or may be dead. But I'd like you to think for a minute, maybe jot down their name, the person who made a difference to you for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. Mrs. Lampshire, maybe a school teacher, maybe a mentor at work, maybe a parent. Could be an aunt or an uncle. It could be a priest or a minister or a Boy Scout leader or a Cubs leader or Brownies or Guides or whatever. Someone that made a difference to you. Just write their name down if you'd be so kind. I'll give you some time for that. And when you do that, I want you to think about 3 traits, 3 personality virtues or 3 character virtues that sort of stand out for you. When you reflect back as an adult on your relationship with them, what were those 3 traits and characteristics that were important to you at the time? It was, as I said, for me, it was honesty with Ms. Lampshire. That's not a little kid processing that. That's an adult looking back, right? Honesty, compassion, and sense of humor. So what were the 3 traits for you of that person? This is part of the conversation around service, because service doesn't come in isolation. It comes as a lineage of, it comes as a heritage. It comes as a generational aspect, because when we're served by others, we get help and support along our life journey, and hopefully they inspire us to help others along their life journey. And that's about something bigger than us, because that's about 5,000 generations. That's way bigger than us. There's people that you're impacting today that you'll never see the results of, because it'll be so far down the road. Okay, so you got those 3 traits. How many people have 3 traits? Everybody got 3 traits? Okay, now here's a question. We don't have time to do this exactly, but here's my question. I want you to think about this very carefully. If I were to ask your colleagues, or your people that you work with, or people that you are friends with, your best friend, or your husband, or your wife, if you, in fact, yourself held those qualities and characteristics, would they say yes? Dollars to donuts, they would. So what's happened, folks, is a wonderful little movie that came a little while ago. It's called Paying It Forward. The person that inspired you, that was your unsung hero as a kid maybe, or as an adult, instilled within you a very deep set of values. And those values, and I know for sure I could ask 5 people in your family or in your life, and even if I did a poll, I'd say, what are 3 traits of Bob or Joe or Sally or Donna? They would actually make that list, and I would even know, we could find them, you know we could. So when that person gives that to you, you sort of take it in and you pass it on to the people that you work with. So your clients, if I were to have them in a room, I said, you know, it was Donna or other names that I can't remember. What was your name again? Kimberly. It was Kimberly this way too? And then they would say, yeah, absolutely. So that's part of the service about self-conversation. It's part of the last piece of the engagement key, is that when we do something, it makes a difference to somebody down the road and immediately, as well as down the road. So that's the big difference. Now here's my homework for you. I had a chance to talk to Mrs. Lampshire when she was 86. It was the year before she died. I had a cup of tea with her. I said, Mrs. Lampshire, I want to thank you for failing me in grade 1. And she said, well, you always were a special boy. I said, well, thank you, Mrs. Lampshire. I said, I want you to know that I went on to become a school teacher. I taught for 9 years in the public school system. Then I got involved in violence prevention. I worked with gangs and stuff like that. And I hope in some small way, it's very inspiring. I have a bad case of inspiritis, inflammation of inspiration. But I hope in some small way that I could be compassionate, have a sense of humor, and, oops, I forgot. That other good thing that she instilled in me. Oh, honesty, yeah. Just be honest with people. And hopefully it's somebody that I could pay it forward to others. Because part of the service ethic, if you will, of engagement is this connection to this idea that when you do something good for someone, it does make a difference. And when people get that, they have to be engaged, because your heart is wide open. Why wouldn't you want more of the same? Why wouldn't you want more of the same? So your homework. If you know the person, or you know they're still alive, call them up and say, this guy named Peter did a workshop today and we talked about service. I want to thank you for the service that you gave. I want you to thank you for paying it forward to me. And I want to be honest with you, and not being, some people have a hard time with this because it's like they're not being humble. But I want you to know that I'm doing my best to pay it forward to the people that I work with and the people that I impact every day. If they're alive, and you can find them do that. If they're not alive, and they're not, you don't know where they are, then by writing that, you just thank them. So you already did your homework. 7 keys to connection, folks. 7 keys to engagement. The biggest factor missing when folks are disengaged is an emotional connection to the organization they're with. Now we have to know that an organization is simply on paper. An organization is people. It's not a building, it's not an address, it's not a bunch of cars in the fleet. That's not what an organization is. An organization is a group of human beings. So the emotional connection to a group of human beings is your engagement level. The greater your engagement level, the greater your emotional connection. 7 keys. You have them in your handout. 7 keys to emotional engagement, 7 keys to opening up emotional connection, 7 keys to engagement to take you much further in your life and to take you much further in the people that you impact and serve, and to take you hopefully much further towards the goals and dreams and the hopes and aspirations of your lives. I want to thank you very much for sharing some thoughts and ideas, and thank you for sacrificing your $20 bill, and I want to say thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it.